Laura, let's talk about the big story. Republicans wanted to wait until the Congressional Budget Office scored the Republican repeal and replace plan, although it's not really repeal per se.
Yeah.
The good news is it would save $337 billion over 10 years, cut the deficit. That's good. But the other headline is 14 million Americans next year would be kicked off of health care, and the politics of that, not really good.
Yeah, I think I know Newt Gingrich blasted the CBO, and I think he makes some great points. I have a slightly different take, though, on this. The narrative is so important, and it's critical that Republicans stay on the offensive as to what Obamacare has done to the nation. I think Donald Trump's been great at that.
Mm-hmm.
And also, when you repeal Obamacare, really repeal it. And at the same time, concurrently, introduce the new legislation that a lot of Democrats, I think Paul Ryan's right, wouldn't like, but that the people would like. And it's the across state lines, the going after the drug companies for their the ridiculous collusion on the price of prescription drugs, all the anti-competitive practices that we know healthcare providers engage in. They get a lot of antitrust protection of the insurance companies. All that stuff that Paul Ryan says we'll do in phase 3. Tom Cotton yesterday on my radio show said phase 3 is a fantasy. It's never going to happen because Republicans will lose this narrative on all these people losing health care. Instead, make the Democrats defend the status quo where health care prices go up every year because of the medical monopolies. That, in my view, is the better way to go because it forces the Democrats to defend an untenable system. Instead, now, we're bickering over whether the CBO is right or wrong. Most people don't know what the CBO is. They don't follow the CBO. We lose that narrative every time. So I think on the narrative building, the Republicans blow the storytelling on this, and I think that's really unfortunate.
But you do know, almost to nauseam, they do not answer any question without saying the Obamacare is dying. It's in a death spiral. We let them get through those 2 or 3 lines, which would be backing up that they are framing the narrative, that we have a dying program, and it's up to us to save a program we had nothing to do with. I thought they've been pretty effective in selling that. You don't think so?
I don't. I really don't. I think this idea that phase 3 is going to come and it's going to be some nirvana. If they believe you can get 60 votes for this phase 3 that we just heard about for the first time last week, then why not do it now? Why not at the same time you repeal, replace with the best legislation that Republicans have right now? Have that debate now. Don't put it off until later this year or next year, because the state budgets are going to implode. When this Medicaid expansion starts to retreat, the state budgets are going to implode, and I think Donald Trump's going to get caught on this in 2020, and I think that there's a trap set for him on this, and, I'd like to spend an hour talking to him about it because I think this is a trap set for Trump, and
for
it's going to be
Ryan,
bad.
too, because they both said, once we do this, they promised that the repeal wouldn't kick any people off of health care, and then you got that headline, well, it's 14 million
people.
But they knew
that. Right, but they knew that, guys, they knew that was going to come out. So you got good news on the deficit. That's fine.
Great.
Yeah. But we know what the media is always going to do. So why not have the substantive debate about the medical monopolies, the collusion in concealing the prices of procedures, all that stuff that helps drive the cost of health care up. Bust that monopoly now. Do all that work now. Make the Democrats defend a corrupt system. Let them do it, and do it now. Don't put it off. I think Tom Cotton is absolutely right on this. I think he's been the best on this. I like Paul Ryan. I think Paul Ryan, has some, good intentions here, but I think you lose this narrative fast unless you turn this thing around.
All right, Laura. Something that's just come out, over the course of the last few months, since the president was elected, Russia, yes, ties to Russia. Well, this just came out. A spokesperson for Vladimir Putin in Russia said, listen, you're all talking over there about Jeff Sessions meeting with Russian ambassadors. Well, guess what? The Democrats did the same thing, including Hillary Clinton's campaign. Listen to what he said.
Did he have similar meetings with Clinton campaign officials? Because I don't know of any.
Well, if you look at some people connected with Hillary Clinton during her campaign, you would probably see that he had lots of meetings of that kind.
We did see that. Senator Claire McCaskill and Nancy Pelosi have met, but the mainstream media is not talking about it, not talking about that soundbite either from yesterday. Look at this, Laura. ABC, NBC, CBS, 0 minutes spent on that story right there. What do you make of it?
First of all, I want to say A+ to the Fox graphics team, because I love that graphic. It doesn't surprise us. I mean, we know what the narrative is here. The narrative that they want to cement in the hearts and minds of the public is that, you know, Donald Trump, the only reason he won is because he was getting some help from the hackers in Russia. It's ridiculous. They have no evidence on this. The fact that an associate once worked on a Ukrainian campaign, you know, years ago, and that he was once, you know, running the Trump campaign. Who cares?
That's all it takes for them.
Yeah, and meanwhile, all these Democrats routinely have meetings with Russian officials. Presumably, they all want Hillary to win. Presumably, they've given some advice to Hillary over the years, and they don't cover it. But this is par for the course, which is why, you know, Donald Trump's doing what he should be doing, focusing on the big issues. Right. Obamacare, tax reform, deregulation. They did a lot of great stuff on the deregulatory framing yesterday, which, again, got very little coverage in the mainstream media. So he's keeping his head down, doing what he promised to do. This Russia stuff, I think most people don't follow it. I think it's it's tenuous at best. But
you know what's going to happen? The next thing is Democrats are going to say, they're politicizing the Intelligence Committee. I'm walking out of the investigation. And the real reason will be because there's not enough there, as James Clapper told us. And they'll say, I think people like Tom Cotton are politicizing this, and Devin Nunes. And that will be their next move. Then they'll keep the story alive. They're all going to run to the cameras. And we got another week of this.
Yeah, I think they want to dominate the headlines with Russia, 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 because otherwise they're going to have to talk about the stock market, job creation, consumer confidence, overall optimism in the future, business development, manufacturing going up, and the border crossings going down. I mean, that's a bad narrative for the Democrats. It's a good narrative for America, and it's certainly an excellent narrative for Donald Trump. So they have to obfuscate. They have to deviate. This is typical Saul Alinsky. None of us should be surprised about this, but I think the Republicans don't get hung up on it. Let the investigation peter out. It will, and then call the Democrats out for what they're doing.
All right. Meanwhile, let's talk a little bit about this. Over at the New York Times, they had this headline, New Ferguson Video Adds Wrinkle to Michael Brown Case. And what they're talking about is guys made a documentary that supposedly shows Michael Brown did not rob the store. Maybe it was a drug deal or something like that.
Yeah, he was exchanging pot for cigars.
Yeah, what a better narrative.
So watch this. Here's the director of this Stranger Fruit documentary. He was on last night, First 100 Days with Martha McCallum, and he's got a problem with the prosecutor and everybody else who has already lined up behind what they feel happened in this. Listen.
The reason we put out this convenience store tape now is so that people could get over it, because he didn't rob the store. And anyone that sees the exchange that takes place with a conscience, a heart, two minds, and is not a bigot pretty much understands what happened. Unfortunately, there's some people in America with so much bias inside of them that they just want to think that Michael Brown is a bad guy.
Well, as it turns out, the prosecutor saw that video, said it not relevant or admissible,
and the guy lied.
When the grand jury was considering charges.
I have a question for Mr. Pollack. How does that change what Michael Brown, and again, it's a horrible, tragic story, too often repeated in urban America, but how does that change what Michael Brown did to the police officer in this case when he reached through the car? And how does it change the fact that hands up, don't shoot never happened? I mean, so the better narrative is that he was swapping pot for cigarillos. In the tape, the prosecutor confirmed was edited deceptively. It doesn't change the narrative at all. I mean, Mr. Pollack seems to be engaging in an act of self-projection. He's accusing the rest of America for being biased, for actually looking objectively, and I guess he's accusing the jury of being in some major collusion with the justice system
and Eric Holder,
in Missouri. Too. Yeah, I mean, that's kind of typical of these lefty filmmaker activists. They want to see the world as they imagine it to be, and reality and facts, they don't really matter. America's an awful, rotten, evil place, and they need to produce films that, again, perpetuate that narrative. So that doesn't surprise me.
And if you had to see, or you saw Martha McCallum last night have a reasonable question for him and see him screaming unhinged unhinged.
Oh, yeah.
When he said he just wanted to present a case, you realize it's totally agenda-driven. So his goal is to reinvigorate some of the hate and some of the unrest in that surrounding community.
Yeah, and then you saw
you
had that protest, a little bit of a protest outside the convenience store. I mean, what was his goal? To make sure the convenience store was looted once again and the windows smashed? I mean, it's despicable. But again, not surprising. These people are very frustrated. America's the curtain's being pulled back on a lot of this activism fueled by George Soros and other left-wing organizations. And most people just want the country to heal and improve. And if it does, these guys are kind of out of work.
All right, Laura. Thanks so much for joining us. Appreciate it.
Great to see you. All right, take care.